Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. This being the last in our series of webinars for your UK policing. Today, again, we're joined by Microsoft to help and support our working securely from anywhere session. So you just move the slide on, Daryl, if that's all right. Just a quick introduction to who we are. So as I said, we've got Daryl Gwynn here and help and support us from Microsoft. We have Ian Stresson, who is the Cloud Transformation Director here at Visual, and then there's myself, Account Director, and also looking after UK Policing, so Caroline Suter. So welcome to everybody. You just move on. Just quickly going to give you a quick, very quick introduction to who Visual are. So Visual are UK-based Microsoft organisation, Microsoft partner. We've been in business for around 15 years, helping organisations across both public sector and private sector to transform and adopt Microsoft technology. So we predominantly work with Microsoft as a really close partner. A lot of the work that we do within Visual and myself in particular is working with the Microsoft team, the Microsoft policing team, to help and align Microsoft services to the police digital strategy. So everything that we do here is really helping police organisations to drive and support the adoption of the Microsoft technology that you've invested in. We're a Microsoft Gold partner across 15 categories, including Azure Expert MSP, which places us at the real top tier of Microsoft partners within the UK and worldwide. And we also have 8 Microsoft Advanced specializations, particularly around security and identity, which really help us to drive those solutions within UK policing. Just move on the next slide. So just a couple of our credentials, just to give you a little bit of background as to our history within UK policing. So over the last 16 years, we've engaged with over 40 forces across the UK, both from tactical and strategic projects. So really helping, as I said, to help police organisations to really adopt and drive the technology transformation that the Microsoft can bring. Closely aligned to the Microsoft policing team. So as I said, a lot of the strategy that we deliver is really helping and supporting the conversations that you'll have with the Microsoft policing teams, but then also, as I said, with the with the police digital strategy through the NEP. We work really closely with the NEP and Police Digital Service, both through the contract that we have with Police Digital Service and helping to really support the NEP standards and blueprints across the UK. And we have another key strategic contract within policing with Warwickshire Police, which we're helping to really help and transform those services as well. So everything that we do here as a police team is helping to align with Microsoft and then also with the Police Digital Service as well. So you know that when you're working with Visual, you're in safe hands and you'll be having the same conversations, helping to drive that transformation throughout your organisation. Now, I think I'm handing straight over to Daryl.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline.
So you can go through yours.
Yeah, great. Can I just check, Caroline, has my slide come across properly, or does it seem to have stalled halfway through?
It seems to have stuck a little bit, Daryl.
Okay, let me just, there we go, that's better. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Daryl Gwynn. I sit in the Cloud Managed Devices team at Microsoft, which is effectively a part of our organization that has one foot in the local subsidiaries. So I spent my time in regulated industries within the UK, and the other foot sits within the engineering group in Redmond. So I work directly with our customers while we land new technologies into markets for the first few years. And with those customers, I can get a kind of direct line of feedback of their requirements and their needs back into the engineering group to mature the roadmap for those products. And so today I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the end user devices space, so Microsoft's strategy for a modern desktop. And there's a number of technologies that kind of come together to form that strategy. And I'm going to just delve a little deeper into two of the technologies that you may be less familiar with, which are Microsoft Managed Desktop and a newer technology which is only launched a few months ago, which is Windows 365. And so, Microsoft spent a lot of time speaking to organizations and going and listening tours and working with the analysts to understand, how is the way people and organizations work changing. And obviously, there have been a lot more accelerated changes that we've seen over the last couple of years with things like COVID. And so our most recent Work Trend Index survey showed some kind of interesting outcomes, which we kind of call internally the hybrid paradox. And that is that a lot of organizations have their workers and managers now saying that they expect and need flexible and remote working options. So a massive proportion of people are saying, I need to be able to work remotely so that I can do the job, I can respond to lockdowns, so I can continue to support family the way we have been over the last few years. But there's also a massive number of those employees also want more in-person collaboration. So while people are saying we need the ability to work flexibly and remotely, we also want to be back in face-to-face and having conversations in the hallway and understanding what other people are working on and how it might map to what I'm doing. And so we've seen these kind of evolving needs for end user computing over the past 15, 20 years. But again, that acceleration we've seen recently with COVID and lockdowns and through the pandemic has really started driving things towards, BYOPC, where in the first lockdown, we saw every type of organization, regulated and unregulated, run out and grab every laptop they could get their hands on, whether it was commercially or through PC World in the high street. And that's because a lot of them just weren't ready for this massive shift to remote working. And so some organizations had to enable that very quickly, and only now, a year or two later, they're starting to get their hands around it and control it in a more manageable fashion. And we're also seeing this kind of move towards or shift towards more partner and contractor support within organizations. So I've been talking to a number of police forces recently who have open heads across their IT organization, and they're really struggling to fill those heads. And so if anyone's read about things like the Great Resignation or the Great Shuffle, it can be harder than ever to attract and retain key talent in organizations like IT, because people are really reevaluating what they want from a job and what they want from an employer and what they want in terms of workplace technology. And obviously, all these things need to be delivered in a way that meets security and regulation needs, but also most organizations that we speak to today are looking at how they can make use of cloud technologies, whether it's long-term or whether it's a burst capability where they have a certain use case or requirement that they want to maybe jump into the cloud to use massive amounts of compute power and then switch that back off again afterwards. And so as we work with organizations, there's really three key pillars to kind of computing solutions today. There's the client PC, so the kind of fat client approach that most people are familiar with and love. So your laptops, your desktops, applications and things installed directly on them. There's a virtualization model where you can build out a VDI type infrastructure, and this way you can change the security posture by keeping all of your content and data centralized and within the boundaries of a data center, where you start to enable things like bring your own device options or external contractor access to organizations or development access from offshore into a virtual bubble that you fully control. So you care less about the physical endpoint and you care more about how you control the compute at the center. And then there's device as a service, which has been of interest across most industries for a long time. And the kind of panacea has been, how do we kind of hand off the running of a full desktop and move it into more of a service or subscription model? But what we've actually seen come about is more often than not just a switch from CapEx purchase of hardware to an OpEx leasing of hardware. We haven't seen that full end-to-end managed desktop service come, and that's obviously what Microsoft are doing in some of these areas with things like MMD. And so if we think about Microsoft's view of our modern desktop strategy, our key focus as an organization is to help our customers deliver a fantastic and consistent user experience for everyone. So whether that's a frontline officer, if it's a back-end IT person or someone in HR, we want to be able to provide the right tools and technologies to make them capable of doing their job. And in a hybrid world today, that means whether they're in the office or the station or at home or wherever, we want to make sure that they have the tools that allow them to work as effectively as possible. And so in the Microsoft world, most of those end user solutions would be built out on top of a kind of base layer of Windows. So Windows as the OS is what we kind of start to build our services and solutions on top of, like the Office client applications, the Teams applications and things like that. And so from Microsoft's perspective, we really have three modalities that allow organizations to consume Windows. You've got that physical device model where we work with our partners, the Dells, the HPs, the Lenovos of the world, and we have our first party OEM in the Surface range of devices. And if anyone's seen any of the kind of recent Ignite announcements, we launched the Surface Management Portal, which is some new innovation built on top of Endpoint Manager that allows you to manage a fleet of Surface devices. So you can quickly look in and see which devices are coming towards the end of warranty, which users are using peripherals where batteries are going to die soon, so we can send them a battery for their mouse or their pen before it actually dies, so you can start to do some proactive support of these users. But this physical approach is as most people would be familiar with, Windows installed on the device, and you kind of use that device for your day-to-day work. On the other side of the fence, we have Azure Virtual Desktop, which is our cloud-hosted VDI model, and that's very much a platform as a service model. So we provide you with a big bag of Lego bricks, which are virtualization capabilities, and you can define and build out the virtualization infrastructure that you need to meet your requirements. So you determine the VM scope and how you build them, and the networking and the disaster recovery and how they fail over, and all of that stuff behind the scenes. And then we have somewhere in between the two, Windows 365, which is our new offering. And Windows 365 provides a virtual machine running in a Microsoft data center. So it provides a lot of the end user experiences and benefits that you would see with AVD. But you manage a cloud PC within Windows 365 as if it was another laptop or desktop within your environment. So if you're following the NEP blueprints and guidance today and you're using kind of modern cloud managed approach, you would simply point those policies and application deployment policies and baselines from your physical device estate at your cloud PC estate as well, and you have fully managed Windows 365 cloud PCs, which your endpoint team can manage in the same way as your laptops, rather than requiring a VDI team of people to manage it the way you would with something like AVD. And so Windows 365 is really built on top of AVD to provide an off-the-shelf VDI capability, so you can utilize it as an IT pro rather than a VDI specialist. Now, once you've used and chosen which kind of personas map to which different use cases here, you can have a mix of any of the three of these different models or approaches for delivering Windows. And with the virtualized models, you've got the ability then to support kind of third-party client devices. So because we're hosting Windows in a virtual environment, you can have your execs connecting to it from the iPad that you can't get out of their hands because they insist they want to use it. Or if you've got people with access only to a web browser, they can still get access to a fully corporately managed version of Windows. Now, once Windows is deployed and running, that's where Microsoft Managed Desktop comes in. So MMD is really Microsoft's offering to help take the responsibility of patching and maintaining and securing Windows off the hands of the customer's IT organization. And so historically, MMD has been a model for providing the onboarding approach. So using Windows technologies like Autopilot, devices can now be delivered directly to an employee's home. You don't need to bring the devices into the IT department and put images onto them and then send them out. We start to use those native Windows technologies for zero-touch onboarding. Microsoft are then responsible for evergreening those devices. So we will push out the Windows quality updates monthly and the feature updates biannually, and the Office and Edge and Teams updates for the Microsoft stack of applications. So with MMD, Microsoft are responsible for keeping you patched and up to date. And then we also enroll those devices into a Microsoft Security Operations Center, or a SOC. So if there are any security alerts from your end user device estate, it's Microsoft security experts, who we invest multiple billions per year in, are responding to those threats on your behalf. So it's Microsoft SOC responding to your endpoint device security, and we have an interlock with your SOC for anything that sits outside of the scope of those end user devices. And then we provide kind of analytics and reporting to show the performance of those devices. Now, for anyone that's heard of MMD in the past, it historically was focused on managing physical devices. So we manage your laptop and your desktop estate. We're currently in preview for managing Windows 365 cloud PCs and AVD persistent desktops, and a slightly longer term plan to support multi-session desktops within AVD as well. So MMD is becoming that strategic management option to kind of trust Microsoft to manage your Windows deployment, whether it's physical or virtual on top of Microsoft technologies. And all of these options are kind of built on top of the Microsoft 365 stack. So we're utilizing Windows 10's inbuilt and native features. We're utilizing Windows 10 inbuilt security. We're using Intune and MEM to manage and patch those devices. We're using Defender for Endpoint to secure and respond to security alerts on those devices. And so this holistically is kind of the Microsoft modern desktop strategy. It's how do we provide the ability to consume Windows to whichever personas and use cases you might have, and then help manage those devices on your behalf. And so we're just going to have a bit of a deeper look at Windows 365 and then MMD in the time we have left on the call. But I will say I'm going to cover through this pretty quickly and at a high level. If anyone has an interest to know more or have a deeper session, do feel free to reach out to Caroline and the team, and they can reach out through myself as well. And we can support with kind of individual sessions on this at a later date. So Windows 365, at a really high level, Windows 365 is the ability to provide a virtual machine running in the cloud. So all of the compute and storage and settings and content are all running in a Microsoft data center and streamed down to an end user, regardless of the endpoint that they're using. So in most cases, you would have the user using a remote desktop client on the device they have if it's supported. Otherwise, they can fall back to a kind of modern HTML browser to get access. And the service itself is called Windows 365. A device that's running within Windows 365 is called a cloud PC, and that's the kind of terminology that we use throughout the offering itself. But at a high level, it's really just aimed at providing a copy of Windows in the cloud. So it's starting to move towards a model where you can consume Windows rather than deploy Windows. And so in a similar way to things like Exchange, where we went from Exchange on premises to Exchange online, this is the kind of first step for Windows, going from Windows on premises, where you buy a license and a device and marry the two, to a model where you just subscribe to Windows running in the cloud. And the intent then is for Microsoft to provide something that's loved by users and trusted and scalable for IT. And so it's available to stream on any device. It's always running and always updated. So these devices aren't shut down at night or when a user disconnects. And that means if you have people who kind of use multiple apps every day and they put them at different places on their multi-monitor setup, when they disconnect and come back the next day or come back on a different device, it's exactly the way they left it. So they get that kind of personal feeling that this is my device. It's not a session that's going to be switched off every time I disconnect. So when I come back in again, that half-written email has disappeared, and that application I was looking at's closed, and that Excel spreadsheet I had open has disappeared. It's like a personal desktop that's running in the background that you can connect to from any device when needed. From an IT perspective, the resiliency and scalability is built into the service. So if you're building your own VDI platform and you suddenly have a requirement for, let's say there's Olympic Games in London and you've got officers being seconded into London to support, you might suddenly need to provide IT services for hundreds or even thousands of users. With Windows 365, you would just buy the licenses that you need, and Microsoft will go off and provision those 5,000 virtual devices on your behalf. If you're doing that in a VDI platform, you would need to go and design and define and scale the platform and make sure that you've got the capacity to run and support that service. Whereas Windows 365 is a model which is much more off the shelf. You just buy the license and you consume the service. And that maps into the kind of purchasing and commercial approach as well. It's licensed in the same way that you'd be familiar with for things like Microsoft 365. So it's a per user, per month license. So if I have a device that has 4 cores and 8 gig of RAM and 256 gig drive, I'll have a specific cost for that subscription, and it'll be the same cost per user per month for as long as I need that device. So again, if you think about a normal VDI approach or a cloud VDI like Azure Virtual Desktop, you've got a flexible model which you can fully optimize, but it's difficult to predict the billing because it really depends on how many users used it that month and how often they were online or offline, how well you were able to optimize the shutting down of the virtualized devices in the background and things like that. So for organizations that are interested in predictable costs, Windows 365 ticks a big box. For organizations who want the flexibility of pricing so they only pay for what they use, then AVD kind of ticks the box for that one. And then simplicity for management and deployment. This is really targeted at your endpoint team managing. So the people who manage your laptops and desktops can manage this, and it's using all the tools they're already familiar with. It's not it doesn't expose a VDI tool set, so you don't need VDI experience to run it. You just say, I want 500 devices of this spec, and Microsoft will create them, and then you manage them as if they're just 500 more laptops within your organization. And so for anyone who is familiar with AVD, we often get the question, well then, how does it differ, and when might I use AVD versus Windows 365? And we sometimes get the question, well, is this the future of AVD? So will AVD go away over time? And so the answer is that we will continue to innovate and invest in AVD. And in the AVD world, that is basically us bringing more virtualization capabilities into that stack that customers can pick and choose from and build into their own solutions. With Windows 365, we'll continue to invest and innovate. And in this case, we're taking those AVD capabilities and adding them into this off-the-shelf service for Windows 365. So for organizations who are investing in and want to invest in VDI capabilities, AVD is likely to be a technology that remains of interest long term. For organizations who just want the ability to quickly react and get virtual devices running, but don't necessarily have or want to invest in VDI capabilities long term, then Windows 365 might be the right solution. And as you dig into the technology, so AVD can do things like multi-session desktops as well as persistent personal desktops. You can virtualize and provision virtual applications within AVD. So you've got more capabilities there compared to Windows 365, which is all focused on a persistent personal desktop model for end users. And so the difference here is you can still work with Citrix and VMware. You can have their management planes. It's got a kind of full control over the configuration management of all of the VDI capabilities, whereas Windows 365 is all about just using MEM. So Microsoft host and manage the backend services. You use MEM to manage those Windows devices once they're running, and you pay per user per month on it compared to that consumption model. So again, AVD, all about flexibility. So if you're interested in running a VDI environment, AVD gives you all the flexibility that you might be familiar with and used to. Windows 365 is all about simplicity and ability to scale up by just buying the license. Now, Windows 365 launched on the 5th of August this year. And at launch, we had a single model, which was a hybrid Azure AD model. And so every device that we created, so if you wanted to set up a team of 10 developers running cloud PCs, you would buy 10 licenses, and then Microsoft would go off and build 10 virtual machines, and all of the resiliency is built in. So Microsoft are responsible for making sure that they're redundant, and there's the option for them to fail over and things like that. Now, if that was an AVD model, everything within this blue box would still be managed by you, the customer, or your partner that you've brought in. With Windows 365, everything in the blue box is Microsoft managed. So all of the virtualization capability is kind of abstracted from you, the end customer. And so you've got the cloud PCs would be created by Microsoft, but the virtual NIC, the network card for those cloud PCs, will sit on your virtual network. So all access to and from these devices is only available from your tenancy and your kind of personally controlled network. But once these devices are created and the virtual network card is in your environment, the devices are then domain joined in this hybrid model and then enrolled into our cloud management tools like Endpoint Manager and Defender for Endpoint and Endpoint Analytics. So although these virtual machines are running in a Microsoft data center, they are fully domain joined, corporately managed, cloud managed devices. And so for organizations who aren't fully up to date on the latest cloud managed NEP guidance, so for organizations still on SCCM and using group policies and things like that, this hybrid model allows you to take those policies which you're pointing at your laptops today and point them at your cloud PCs so they get the same group policies, the same applications, the same management policies and things like that. So this hybrid model was launched as the model to meet customers where they are today. So for organizations that still have a reliance on Active Directory on premises and maybe still have network controls that are tied into being domain joined, or legacy applications that are looking for specific domain joined credentials and tokens on the device, this hybrid model is the model for them. We are currently in preview then for 2 other models, and these models align more with the latest kind of Volume 11 cloud managed blueprints from the NEP. And these are the Azure AD joined models. Skipped ahead a bit too quickly there. So Azure AD joined, oh, skipping ahead again. My pen is, I think it's switched off the ink. There we go. So Azure, my pen has just decided to stop working all of a sudden. So I'll use my mouse to flick around things. But Azure AD joined model means we remove that reliance on the on-premises Active Directory. And so in this model, we still create these cloud PCs for you. I'm using my mouse now, so my writing's going to get worse, I think. So we still create these virtual machines. We still use your own network. So this is a bring your own VNet model. And so the network for the device is still managed by you, but it's natively Azure AD joined. We don't do a domain join in this model. So this aligns a bit more closely to that, the more recent refreshes for the NEP guidance. So this model allows organizations to still get all of the same approaches and value in quickly provisioning cloud PCs, but it removes that requirement for credentials for the devices to be domain joined. It removes that requirement for line of sight of a domain controller and things like that. So that's kind of Azure AD join model 1. Model 2 is much more of a like a zero trust type model. So in this case, the virtual machines themselves, as well as the virtual networking. Again, it's ahead on me. There we go. So the virtual machine is now run and managed by Microsoft, and they're connected to a virtual network that's managed by Microsoft, and they break directly out to the internet. So in this model, it's just like an internet joined device. It's not joined to your corporate network. So you're not managing all the ingress and egress to the device. You're not managing the kind of proxying on that network and things like that. So this model is for organizations that have really adopted zero trust. So they're still managing the device. It's still fully cloud managed and locked down with your policies and apps and things being sent and configured on it. But it's not connected to a corporate network. It's connected to a kind of open internet connection. So those 3 models, the Azure AD joined with this Microsoft hosted VNet, Azure AD joined with your own managed VNet, and hybrid joined, which is using your own managed VNet, are the 3 models for Windows 365. The hybrid model is available today, and the Azure AD joined models are in preview at the moment, and they're expected to be generally available kind of early next calendar year, so maybe January, February sort of time. And so at a high level and very quickly, that's a kind of introduction to Windows 365 and where it sits. But it's really just this model for helping organizations get the benefits of virtualization for their desktop experience without the requirement to invest in all of the skills that are normally required to deliver those capabilities. And now I just want to kind of change tack a little and talk a little bit more about Microsoft Managed Desktop. And so Microsoft Managed Desktop, why did Microsoft move in this direction? And if you take the kind of concept of evergreen at a high level, organization after organization was kind of feeding back to us at Microsoft that we are struggling to map to this evergreen cadence. We're struggling to get patches out monthly as well as feature updates out every 6 months. And by the time we've kind of got up to speed with them, we need to start testing our applications for compatibility issues all over again for the next feature update before our current one goes out of support and things like that. And then from a security perspective, we know that when we release a security patch on say a patch Tuesday, the amount of time it takes for that to be reverse engineered and an exploit created and then weaponized and then exploited by a script takes on average for this whole process about 72 hours. Apologies, I'm writing now with my mouse rather than a pen, but 72 hours. So for organizations, it's critical to try and get your security patches out as quickly as possible so that your estate is secured and protected before these security threats and vulnerabilities are weaponized and exploited. And so when we talk to organizations, there are obviously a range of different kind of timelines that people see. But when we look at our telemetry, we can see that up to 40% of commercially managed devices are at least 2 updates behind. So if it takes 3 days to really exploit and weaponize some of those security vulnerabilities, these organizations in some cases are 60 days behind getting their estate patched, and that's an obvious and critical security risk. And so from an MMD perspective, we started to look at, well, what can we do to help organizations make sure they can stay on top of their patching and their life cycle on their devices, not just the security patches, but their feature updates. And now with Windows 10 to Windows 11, MMD will help organizations move directly to that new operating system. But there are really two steps. And again, this aligns quite well with the NEP blueprint guidance. And step 1 is for an organization using kind of classic on-premises IT management technologies, there's not much that Microsoft can do in terms of a cloud service to support that. So we don't have access to your Active Directory, so we can't help you manage that, and we can't really do much about the domain join or your group policies because these are all secured internally on your network. However, if we help organizations transition or transform from on-premises management technologies to cloud technologies, then we can work with you to get access to your Azure Active Directory. So because that's running in Microsoft Cloud, it makes it possible for us to help you run it. Same with AAD domain join, same with mobile device management policies and Intune and Company Portal. So MMD is really 2 things. It's an ability to help organizations transform to a kind of modern cloud managed model. And then once they're in that cloud managed model, Microsoft can help manage some of those aspects on a customer's behalf. And so from an MMD perspective, it's really Intune and Defender for Endpoint that we kind of use to support customers in managing their environment on their behalf. And so the guiding principles that we're following with MMD is how do we provide the best device experience for end users? So Microsoft engineers design and develop Windows and Office and Teams and the full Microsoft stack. So who better to know how best to manage it and secure it and make sure you get the right balance of security and reliability and performance on those devices. And so with MMD, we've got a key focus on the idling CPU time and the battery life on the device and the time it takes to boot and come back from standby. And that's all focused on the end user experience. Then from a security perspective, we invest billions each year in our security experts, the full-time employees that work in our security organizations, as well as investment in our security technologies and capabilities. And so MMD is one of the first services where we have kind of opened the doors to allow organizations assets to be protected by Microsoft security personnel. And then from an IT perspective, we hear time and again from CIOs that their IT teams spend an inordinate amount of time just patching and maintaining Windows. And really, organizations like police forces would want IT helping officers be able to spend more time with citizens and be out in the street more and be more visible in the front line. In banking, it might be that they want IT to help their organization make more money and invest better and have better insight into investments and things like that. But what people don't want is to invest in a very highly trained IT team who then spend all their time just pushing out Windows and Office updates. So MMD is really about how do we take responsibility for some of those more mundane tasks, freeing up your IT teams to focus on more mission critical activities. And so when we've deployed MMD, we've brought kind of Qualtrics and Forrester and people in to review what the impact has been for organizations. And from an end user perspective, we see a massive reduction in boot times. So in some regulated organizations who have 30 plus security agents running on devices, we've seen boot times reduced from 15 minutes down to 30 seconds. But the average that we see is around an 85% reduction of an MMD device's boot time versus a corporate managed device. And that also aligns with a massive reduction in crashes. So we see less blue screens and less mean time between crashes and kind of managing the experience and performance on the device. So lowering that idling CPU time with the reduction of agents and things means that we see double the battery life on an MMD managed device compared to the same device on a corporate managed estate. And then that kind of translates into an IT benefit of kind of drop in help desk calls due to increased performance and stability, massive reduction in IT time spent just managing and maintaining the device endpoints, and a massive reduction in the time it takes to get devices set up. So the kind of joiners and movers process is really accelerated. And then from a leadership or kind of HR perspective, you see a big increase in employee impact, employee engagement, in how employees feel valued or invested in by the organization by being given the right tools to do their job, and a massive increase in net promoter score, where we go from a kind of average net promoter score of -10. So you've got more detractors in the organization who feel like they're not valued or invested in, to around +64 with MMD. Where most people in the organization feel like they've been given the right tools for the job and they're invested in, and that they're valued as employees. And so MMD is really kind of making three commitments. It's committing to helping and manage the evergreen process for the organization. It commits to not breaking any of your internal applications. So if there are any kind of legacy or in-house apps that you're running on your desktop today, and Microsoft push out a Windows or an Office update which has a compatibility issue with your application, it's Microsoft who take responsibility for the remediation efforts and understand what happened there. And so the most usual outcomes that we see is that the MMD team work with Windows engineering and we tweak the patch so that it doesn't break your application. But on other occasions, we've worked with the ISVs who built your app or your in-house developers who built the app to help them tweak the code in the application so that it's less likely to have future compatibility issues, because it aligns more with the best development practices. And then we kind of make commitments to secure and manage and respond to security threats on your endpoint devices. Now, just in the last few weeks, we've made an announcement on MMD, and so everything that I've talked about so far today has until now just been called Microsoft Managed Desktop. At Ignite, we announced MMD Plan 1. And so everything that I've talked to date is now called MMD Plan 2. And MMD Plan 1 is going to launch in the new year. So again, say around February time. But the intent with MMD Plan 1 is to, again, try and meet organizations where they are today. And so whereas MMD Plan 2 is all about setting the security baseline and onboarding the devices with Autopilot and managing that onboarding experience, and then managing and patching the devices as well as enrolling them in our SOC. All of that requires an organization to kind of transform and become modern. So they need to be using the cloud management tools like Intune. They need to be, or at least able to use those tools and able to use Defender for Endpoint. But for organizations that aren't quite far enough along that transformation journey, MMD Plan 1 aims at providing a lower barrier of entry. So there's fewer prerequisites for MMD Plan 1 than MMD Plan 2. And so MMD Plan 1 is really just that patching piece. So Microsoft will take responsibility for patching Windows, Office, Teams, and Edge, regardless of what state of transformation your organization is in today. So for organizations that are still using SCCM and group policies, we can just take over the patching for those devices. So we'll set up a kind of co-management approach where Intune can push out the Windows and Microsoft application updates and manage the deployment of those. And we do that by kind of intelligently managing your deployment rings within your environment. So we look at what is the smallest number of devices that we can target, which will cover the largest range of differences across the organization. So we'll choose a handful of devices which represent the different device models that you have, the different driver stacks that have been installed, the different firmwares on them, the different application estate, and we will push updates slowly and intelligently out to those deployment rings while looking for any compatibility issues. And then we manage the progressive increase of rollout across deployment rings to broader and broader communities of users. So for organizations who are either struggling to remain evergreen and want Microsoft to come and just help with the patching, Plan 1 makes sense. For organizations who are looking at Windows 11 and nervous about it, then MMD Plan 1 allows you to bring in Microsoft to help upgrade you to Windows 11 as part of that patching cycle. But what we kind of see for most organizations that look at the two, we've got Plan 2 here, which is the kind of historic version of MMD. And the only things missing in here are the kind of ability to onboard devices without re-imaging and the support for hybrid. Now, the reason for this is that MMD Plan 2 is onboarded when you give a user a new device normally. So if you're doing a hardware refresh, you purchase the devices from your reseller, have them sent to people's homes, and then MMD Plan 2 has kind of configured Autopilot and Intune to make sure that those devices can be onboarded seamlessly. If you have existing devices, which you don't want to re-image or reset to onboard to Plan 2, then Plan 1 allows you to bring in Microsoft to do the patching in those devices. And then as those devices age and you replace them, you can give a user a new device who can onboard directly to Plan 2. So for a lot of organizations, they see Plan 1 as a kind of transitionary offering. So we use it today so Microsoft can manage the patching for the full device estate. But as we kind of go through device refreshes, we move everyone to Plan 2, and that means we get the full end-to-end MMD offering with the SOC capabilities and the security baselines and everything else that comes with it. And so in a fairly short amount of time, that's kind of what I wanted to cover today, just an introduction to what Microsoft's thinking is in the kind of modern desktop space and what our strategy is in that space. And then some of the newer technologies, so Windows 365 as we ran through, and Microsoft Managed Desktop, which is kind of summarized on these slides. It's all about that expert security and delighting end users with the best experience possible and empowering IT to focus on more important activities. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to run through. If anyone's interested in knowing more, again, reach out to Caroline and team, but I'll just hand over to Ian now, who has a few slides to go through some of Visual's cloud transformation services.
Perfect. Thank you, Daryl. Yeah, you've just moved on for me. Thank you. So, yeah, I just wanted to take a few minutes, I suppose, at the end of Daryl's sort of brilliant run through there, and hopefully that some of that information for you is new. Obviously, there's a lot of it that's been sort of announced with Ignite recently, but not everybody I know has the time and the bandwidth to listen to some of that. So I think Daryl's what Daryl's gone through there is hopefully whetted your appetite. And as mentioned, if you've got any questions on any of what we've been through today or anything from the series, actually, please do feel free to get in touch with us, which we've got some contact details in a couple of slides' time. So just again, as a reminder, I know Caroline mentioned some of this at the beginning, really, about some of the things that Visual do. And in the main, we're a systems integrator and we have consultancy services. We also offer support services as well. But as this webinar is kind of more focused around the police sector and the PS&S space, we know that obviously you've got IT teams internally, and you've also got guidance that is provided to you from the National Enablement Programme, specifically, I guess, in this area as well, that we've been talking about across this series around modern work, around hybrid teams, meetings, around how the end user devices, as per this session, could be looked after and managed, and then some of the additional opportunities that might be coming from Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. So we, as Caroline mentioned, we've got a really strong relationship with the Police Digital Service, which are the National Enablement Programme, a part of that organisation, and we work really closely with them. So we support them as an organisation with their own internal IT support services. And we're also now starting to help them with the development of the sort of future guidelines. We know that obviously Design Refresh 3 or version 8, I think as it's more commonly known, is out at the moment, which gives you all the guidelines as to how to deploy Office 365 or Microsoft 365, of course, but all of the Office 365 suite, and then in particular around this area, you know, how to look after your sort of Windows 10 estate. And then that will be the intention of, I think, with working with our colleagues in that space, is that the updates, and in fact, the version 8 is almost like a line in the sand. If we can get to there, and if you can all get yourselves to that point, then the management capabilities that will introduce will mean that the next iterations, so the version 8s, 9s, version 9s, 10s, etc., that will come, will be a lot easier for you to roll out, and it will be a much more iterative process rather than sort of potentially some major changes. So we want to, of course, help you to get there. We've got experience with applying these services into multiple police forces now. And as I say, we're working with the PDS team to actually look at how the development of these guidelines should take place as well. So we think we're in a fairly unique position to work with you to help you to get these implementations done. Daryl, if you could move me on. Thank you. So we've got a kind of go-to-market kind of customer strategy, and to be perfectly honest with you, this is a slide which is generic across all sectors, rather than being more specific around police force. We know, as I've just touched on, that you've got certain guidelines, but we have offerings across the different areas. So, for example, you might be fairly happy with how to roll out things like the Intune management side of things, but you may have concerns about, or you don't have maybe quite as much experience with managing Android and iOS devices as part of Intune. So we've got, engagements around a modern desktop, around end user mobility. So you can kind of take us and work with us on a tactical level, or if you wanted to say, get somebody to come in and go, right, obviously we've got this version 8 of the guidelines. Can you just help us to apply the whole lot? Then we can help you with the sort of modern work planning and implementation to really help you across the piece. So across Office 365, as well as the end user devices and the whole management capability that comes with that version 8. So yeah, again, get in touch with us. Daryl, if you can just go to that last slide for us. Thank you. So it wouldn't be modern at the moment without a Black Friday sale or a Cyber Week, whatever it is, sale. So we are coming to you with an offer, which is that for joining or listening to the webinar that we've done today, obviously this will be recorded as well, so you can watch this back multiple times through the different social media channels that we'll release it on. But if you are interested in understanding how Visual can help you to implement your version 8 and your modern management journey, version 8 of the NEP, of course, and then your modern management journey, if you need some help to understand where you are with that journey, or how we could help you to get that journey finished off and ready for the next iteration that will come, we're offering a free consultancy session to do that. So you can sign up at the link that is provided there. Just go to that web URL, risu.al/free workshop, and there's a little questionnaire. If you can fill that out, and then we'll be in touch with you to arrange that session. Or if you'd rather not enter the details that way, please just get in touch with ourselves on the telephone number and the website, or if Caroline or one of our account team is in touch with you, or they should be in touch with you as well, then you can get back in touch with us through those methods. And I think that's it. That's all I had to say. We would open this up to questions if there are any, but I think in the Q&A I'm just looking, I don't think there are any. So I guess we'll close that down and say, Daryl, thank you very much for your time. That's been, for me, really informative. And Caroline, thank you very much for setting up the session.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.